So bear with me. All right. So we already touched on something good. Thank you guys so much for sharing. I love to hear the positive stuff that's going on and, not just hear about the things that you're struggling with, but also the good stuff. All right. So today, if you've been to one of my test preps before, this one or moving forward, I'm structuring these a little bit differently and adding some more helpful information for you guys. So up on the screen, I have some study tips that I just wanted to touch on because some of you have been out of school, not very long. Some of you are going to college at the same time. Some of you haven't been doing any sort of schooling in a long time. So I just want to circle back to some study tips. I won't go through all of these. I do have a handout that I'm going to upload in the chat for you that you can download and save that has a lot of this stuff included in it, but not everything. Um, so before I get too deep into this, can everybody hear me okay? Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Perfect. Okay. So, as I've been doing this, I've been doing this for a couple years now. So, I'm starting to see patterns of behavior or study habits that I'm kind of excited to be able to turn around and share with you guys. So, I've noticed that some people will say to me, "Oh, I've read the chapter 5 times and it's just not sticking." So I wanted to point out that reading is not actually considered a form of studying, and it's not really that great for retention. The as far as absorbing information and um, understanding that information, reading is probably one of the least reliable ways to do that. So you're going to want to do something that's a little more engaging, whether that's flashcards, a game. I suggest for people to create a match game, like those fun games that, well, they're kid games, but you have all these cards face down on the table and you have to flip the ones that match. And that's just another way to challenge your brain to be learning this information and applying it to memory. I have on here about having a study guide, and I'm pulling this up right now. I actually have one for you. You guys don't need to reinvent the wheel on this. That handout that I referenced is uploading right now, and within that, there is a study guide that we'll review together. When you go to study, have an intent behind it. If you study every day, if you study 3 times a week, whatever that looks like, when you're done studying for that day, make a plan of what you're going to cover the next time you sit down. So maybe that's financing or you're going to cover contracts, but have a very clear focus of what you're studying and try not to go all over the place. It's a lot easier to retain that information if it's similar than all across the board. And that goes to this point of 30 minutes versus 3 hours. I'm not much of one to go to the gym, but I have heard that if you can do 30 minutes of really high intensity, that's the same as like 3 hours of low intensity. I don't know if that's true, but when it comes to studying, that definitely applies to have that focused, intense time versus 3 hours of getting a snack and going to the bathroom and checking your phone 6 times and doing a quick post. Look at, I'm almost done with school, all of that stuff. Just really focus in. And then the last thing I wanted to touch on here is when you're able to explain a concept, that's when you've truly understood it yourself. So that if you feel like you need another route of getting that information buried in your brain or feel confident in it, I'm going to pull back the curtain a little bit. And sometimes, what I do when I'm learning something new and I have to teach on it in my position at work or as a real estate agent and I have to educate my client, I practice my spiel in the car. So You could kind of do the same thing. Practice explaining it. If you had to teach somebody about the difference between riparian and littoral rights, how would you do that? So, kind of just again, twisting your brain in a different way to try to explain the topic to somebody else versus just rote memorization of the words as they are on the page. Any questions on that before I move on to the next slide? All right, so now we're going to cover a little bit of what to expect on the actual exam. So if you're in school, you haven't tested yet, this will be particularly pertinent. Or if you are retesting, maybe you didn't know this stuff and it'll help you for the next time. Once you complete schooling, you're going to get an email with an invitation to schedule your exam from AMP PSI. That will take about 40 or 24 hours. If it takes 48 hours, I wouldn't sweat it. Beyond that, reach out to me. There might be an issue going on there. And actually, yeah, reach out to me. I can connect you with somebody at PSI so you can get that taken care of because there's something that may not have connected on the back end or some little thing. When you test, I listed out the locations there in the Seattle area. There are locations at more outlying areas as well. Uh, with the reduced capacities due to COVID, some of the testing centers are filling up quicker than others. So if your preferred testing center isn't available for the date you want to test, you know, be a little bit open to other locations because that 1 hour drive might be worth skipping the week-long wait to actually test. Excuse me, parched. Once or before you're able to schedule your exam, you do have to have your schooling 100% complete and submit the exams at the end of each chapter, not chapter, end of practices and end of fundamentals. Once you have finished your schooling, you have 2 years to test. Don't wait that long if you can help it though. I Probably my second best piece of advice is when you get that email, get your test scheduled, put it on the calendar, make it an appointment versus a goal. It's so easy to get caught up in life and everything going on around you for something just to slip down the list and not become a priority anymore. So when you're done, when you're still excited, you've got that energy high, get that test scheduled. You can schedule it out for a couple months if you need that much time. Chances are good you don't need that much time though. You really don't. So just get it on the schedule. It will cost you a fee of $138.25, and that is the fee each time you test. So on the day of or for the exam itself, excuse me, there is 135 questions total. There's 100 questions on the national portion, 30 on the state portion, and 5 trial questions that'll be used on future versions of the exam. Those 5 trial questions are not graded. They're just they're testing the test questions for future versions of the exam. You'll have 3.5 hours to test. I think I've only heard of one person going over, so 99.9% of the time, you're going to have more than enough time to get through this. And you are able to use the bathroom, but that time will be deducted from your overall testing time. When you go in, you'll have a little cubicle space that you'll be working at. They'll have a computer for you to take the exam on. The only thing that they're going to allow you to have is some scratch paper and a little bit of golf, like a little golf pencil that they'll provide to you to use during the exam. That is it. And then once you are done with the exam, they're going to let you know within a minute or two how you did. Now, from what I've been told, oftentimes they're kind of secret agent about it and they like hand you the piece of paper up like face down. They won't tell you how you did. You have to wait it through. But they will give you a piece of paper that will tell you if you passed or failed. If you passed, they will not tell you what your score was, but you will need to get at least a 70% on both the state and the national in order to pass. It is possible to pass one section and not the other. If that does happen, you don't need to take that portion that you passed again. However, the portion that you failed, you will need to pass that within 6 months. Um, so if that happens though, if you take the exam, you don't pass, reach out to me. I'm happy to look at your test scores and compare that against a question breakdown to figure out the best route forward so that you're focusing your study efforts on what's going to give you the greatest return. So just reach out and let me know how I can help on that. So on the day of the exam, they're going to require that you bring two forms of ID, one like with a photo, one with your signature. So a driver's license and a credit card are just fine. The only thing they're going to allow you to bring into the room is a basic calculator. Other than that, if you have reading glasses, they will let you take those, but that's it. If you have a jacket on or a coat, a hat, a watch. They're going to take all of that, your wallet, your purse, and they're going to secure it in a locker or a backpack. They will also take your phone. They're very sensitive about the information potentially getting out that's on the exam. A couple years ago, apparently somebody hacked the system, and since then, they've really put this on lockdown and been very secure about what goes in and what goes out. And the scratch paper that they provide you during the test, they will not allow that to leave at the end. They want you to leave that there. So just some basic stuff. Make sure you get a good night's sleep. Know where you're going the day before. Plan for traffic. Plan for weather. If you're late, even by a minute, they don't have to let you in, and they can make you reschedule. So that would be a huge bummer to have to plan for another day. So plan to be early and eat something before you go so you don't get hangry. Are you guys able to access the attachment that I put in the chat?
Yes.
Okay, great. Thank you. So I have all of this information on the slide noted there, so I won't go through all of this, but I do want to point out there's like three of these that kind of all go together. That my very, very best advice to you is to take your time and to go really slow through this exam. All of the questions are multiple choice, so they're going to be the same format that you've experienced going through school or taking your practice exams. But while you're going through that process of taking these practice exams, once you do it enough, you start to memorize these questions. And it's not so much that you know the information, it's that you've memorized it. So when you go to take the actual exam, it's not uncommon for some questions to be similar from your study materials, and also not uncommon for them to take a question and add the word not to it or isn't, or just throw one little thing in there that completely changes the question. And if you don't slow down enough and if you're just going off of that knee jerk memory, you'll miss that and get that question wrong. And if you do that enough, you know, end up not passing. And that, so slow down. I recommend reading the question first, reading all four answers, read the question again, and then through a process of elimination, find the right answer. And I suggest doing the process of elimination because questions don't have, let me back up, not all questions have just one right answer. Like in life, I mean, real estate is life. There's not always just one clear cut answer to every single question. And some of these questions are going to have two right answers. And you're not just choosing the right one, you're choosing the most right or the most appropriate given the situation provided. So, again, slow down, use a process of elimination because if you're not, you can miss it so easily. And I think a lot of people don't pass, or a lot of the people that don't pass the first time end up coming back to me, and not all of them, but some of them will be like, I don't think I read the questions well enough. So don't let that be you. Read the questions carefully. For math tips, on the national portion, you won't have math on the state portion. I just wanted to really quickly touch on these couple of key things. And I do have these noted in that packet as well. Some of the things that you're definitely going to want to have memorized, I'm going to skip to the next slide first and then come back to this. But all of these conversions and these formulas, you have to know if you're going to do well on the math portion. So feel free to take a picture of this or whatever. But you have to know this stuff because there are so many questions just from the information listed on this screen. And then I wanted to give a tip too with these conversions. If you're not to this portion yet, don't worry about it. You'll get there. And then I'll be available to help then. So don't worry about this. But um, when you're doing the math problems that include conversions, make sure you're checking the units that your answer is supposed to be in and be converting your units along the way. With the math questions, one of the ways that they will try to trip you up is they include if you made a common mistake during the math problem that other people have made and you got to a similar answer to other people, they're going to have those wrong answers there. So if you make a mistake in the formula, you could end up choosing an answer that you think is right because it's there, but it's actually not. And then back to this one, I won't go too much into depth on this since we are focusing on state today, but memorize that capitalization rate formula. Make sure you remember that the discount points are 1% of the loan amount, not the purchase price, and that 1 point is equal to 1% of that loan amount. And then with mills, they're a tenth of a cent, and it's a unit of measurement for calculating taxes. Really, that's all you need to know there. Um, and again, feel free to take a picture of this slide if you would like. I think that, oh, this is the last one as far as licensing tips. So in over the summer, the Department of Licensing updated a lot of the way that they handle issuing licenses and the process leading up to that, as well as renewals. So I just wanted to share some of this information with you because if you are testing somewhat soon or whenever you do plan to test, there are things you can do to get the ball rolling sooner in your new career. So once you pass your exam, it takes about 3 days for the Department of Licensing to communicate, excuse me, it takes about 3 days for, yeah, the Department of Licensing to receive the information from PSI that you passed. So we usually have to give them a little bit of time to even know that you took the test and passed. On top of that, they also require that you have fingerprinting and a background check done and processed before you're allowed to apply for your license. So I have this website here, identigo.com. This is the only company you can get license or your fingerprints done for real estate. They won't accept like the paper cards. They won't accept them from another company. If you work for a governmental agency or something like that, you can reach out to Identigo and they can work with you on getting those fingerprints transferred over. However, you will need to submit all of your information to get a fresh background check specific to real estate. So their information is there. That background check is $42.80 due at the time of scheduling. And then there's locations everywhere. It'll only take about 10 minutes. And the results are good for 6 years. So it takes 7 to 10 days to process these fingerprints, and it can take up to 14 days. So once you've passed your exam, it's important to know you're not a real estate agent yet, and it is a licensing violation to say that you are until all of this is done. So I just want to caution you because it does happen sometimes that people just don't know the process. So if you're testing anytime soon, about a week before you test, I would go get your fingerprints done. So then you only have to wait for the DOL to communicate with the testing facilitator and not this as well. So then you can get your license, you could hit the ground running within a couple days versus within possibly up to a couple weeks. So with all of that information that I just shared, do you guys have any questions, any concerns before we dive into some state topics?
If you don't pass the test, do you get to take those answers home to see what you, or I'm
Y-
assuming you have to leave it there given how
Yeah, yeah. So what happens there is you'll never see the test again. um, so they have it pretty locked down and they don't release any of that information. What they will do though, do I have it up here? Okay. Let me come back to that. One moment.
It'll look like this.
Yeah, thank you, Javon. So, can you guys see Javon? He's showing a results page there. So, Javon is taking another stab at the exam. And so, that is the breakdown they gave him. He already passed the state version, so it's only showing the national, but it gives you your score in each one of those categories. So then if you don't pass, um, you can email that over to me. I'll take a look at it and I will compare it against what I have. Let me go back over here. I'll compare it to this that I have up on the screen. So this information is in your packet. It just looks a little bit different. And this is the breakdown of all of the questions on the exam by topic. So on the left-hand side is the national portion. As I said, there's 100 questions on that exam. So I listed these in order of percentage of the exam. So like contracts, 17 questions, 17% of the test. If you're going to do great in any one topic, that's the one. And so you can see here as you get down to the bottom, like leasing and property management down here, why even spend your time on it when you only need to get 70 questions right? So pick your 70. The more you can get right in one topic, the better. Focus your efforts instead of spreading yourself thin. And then for the state portion, same thing, all of that broken down. This one here, the Washington statutes and rules governing the activities of licensees, 43%. That's huge. Whereas, some of these are a little bit smaller. So take this information and use this as part of your study guide. This helps greatly with that. And then the other thing I wanted to just explain to you guys, I don't have it on this slide deck, but I do have it in that packet. So this should be in the chat box. Um, what this is it takes that information I just showed you on the slide and it breaks it down even further. So since I touched on contracts first, let's find that. Where is it? Oh, here we go. All right. So contracts is 17 questions. And here it breaks down exactly what information is included in those 17 questions. So if you're like, all right, it's Thursday night, tonight I'm doing contracts, you get out your book, your flashcards, whatever your method is, and you sit down and you're like, okay, requirements for validity of a contract, and you study it. And then you move on to number two. Like you don't have to think, you don't have to get creative. I got this information from PSI. They put this on their website. You can find it on their website in their it's candidate handbook. I just put it in this packet. Last thing I want to touch on, I said that like 3 times already, but I have this very small at the bottom of your page. Are you guys all seeing this okay? Where it says tips and tricks at the bottom? Okay. So with the exam, there's 3 levels of competency that they're testing you on. This first one is recall recognition, basically your ability to memorize the information. So, like vocabulary and understanding the principles of a concept. The other way they're going to test you is through application. So, your ability to interpret the information that's applied to you and choose the right answer given the situation or the context provided. And then the third way they're testing you is your analysis. So essentially your judgment of situations. Um, so it's really interesting that it's, having a variety of ways that you're studying and a variety of places that you're getting your materials from is super helpful. All right. So just for now, so we are going to talk about state topics. Is there anything in particular that you guys are struggling with that you would like me to touch on when it comes to state information? Or typically what I do is I will kind of walk through some of these concepts and break them down in just plain language explanations so that you're a little bit more familiar with scenarios where this might apply in real world situations. But first, let's start with any questions about anything we covered, or just any questions in general. It doesn't just have to be the state, but I just want to get your guys' questions answered if you have them.
Yeah, about the sample exams on the Rockwell test. Are those pretty comparable to the tests that we'll be taking?
Yeah, so the style of the questions, like the rhythm of them, so to speak, that will be similar. I mean, you're not going to see a lot of the exact same questions on the exam, but I
Mm-hmm.
mean, they're going to be similar to what you've been seeing. It won't be a huge shock when you sit in front of the computer. And Brittany, she tested it most recently. I tested in 2013, so it's been a minute. But what would you say, Brittany? Was it pretty similar?
Yeah, those were actually the tests that helped me pass because the verbiage was very similar. And even some of the questions were very similar to what I saw. So I took those a lot and these Quizlet practice exams a lot.
Cool.
Awesome. Thank you. Anybody else? Okay. All right. I was unprepared and didn't grab my book. Oh, it's just on the other side of the room. Let me answer Eleanor's question first, though. Do we need to know the time frames and expiration dates of different processes for the exam, offers, disclosures, acceptance, rejection, contingencies, financing, and backup offers? No, you don't need to have all of those timelines memorized. Um, the timelines that they're going to question you on are going to be more related to your license, like for the state portion, knowing like how many clock hours and then how often you need to renew and expiration cancellation, and we'll walk through that too. But you'll be good on that other stuff. Give me just 1 second. Okay. All right, so the test breakdown or the test question breakdown that I showed you guys is specific to the national. The second page on that packet, there is a state portion breakdown. It's just, much less questions, so much less of a breakdown. Sorry. So let's tackle this portion of the exam that's 43% on the state portion. That's Washington statutes and rules governing the activities of licensees. So, how many people went to Rockwell or are going to Rockwell? Okay, thanks, Frederick. Next. Okay. So if you went to Rockwell, they have this book. Let me, oh, 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 there we go. The Insider's Guide for Passing the Washington State Real Estate Exam. Um, this book I have, it's the 5th edition. I do have a couple of these at my office that I can loan out to you if you would like to borrow them. I bought mine at Half Price Books for $9, like a year ago. So, and I know that you can get them really cheap on Amazon. Now, I'm not saying go out and buy this book. I wouldn't, unless you're like struggling or just really feel like you're not getting what you need from your current study materials, but don't spend money if you don't have to. But in this book, the portion of the state exam is all covered in one chapter, chapter 17. So the first thing on this list is managing brokers' relationship with affiliated licensees. So really quickly, just to give some context, if it's been a minute since you've been in the material, with the broker and the managing broker's license, the broker license is the first license you can get as a real estate agent. That is the one that you're all studying for right now, the 90 clock hours plus the exam. And then the managing broker's license is a license you can get 3 years after you've been in the industry full time. And that license will allow you to hire brokers and become a designated broker if you wanted to, or run a team, manage a team of brokers. So the managing broker's license requires additional 90 hours of education. It is an additional licensing fee, but that managing broker license is required to become that designated broker, and those are the relationships we're talking about in this situation. Thanks for going on that journey with me. So what they're talking about in this chapter is with the affiliated brokerages, when you choose a brokerage that you're going to join, you become affiliated with that brokerage. And until you become affiliated with a brokerage, your license is not active. And so an inactive real estate license is equal to no license at all. So once your license becomes activated, you enter into a relationship with that designated broker, and they have responsibilities to you the same as you have responsibilities to the brokerage. So you are an independent contractor. However, as you have learned while you're going through school, there's laws and regulations that we have to follow and uphold in order to keep our license, and then also maintain a good relationship with the brokerage that you join. So with the affiliated licensee relationships, so the designated broker is the supervisor, more or less, of the brokerage. So her license is legally responsible for all other licenses within that firm. So it's a position of, a lot of trust in the people that they're working with, that they're going to be able to keep practicing real estate as well. So a designated broker is required to supervise the actions of their brokers. So if you were to not put a key back in a lockbox at a property, or if you did some forms incorrectly, your designated broker is going to be on the hook for that as well. Excuse me. So, with the designated broker's relationship, with your first 2 years in the business, your designated broker is required to oversee your transactions at a higher level than they do other agents. So, looking at your contracts a bit more carefully, ensuring all your I's are dotted and your T's are crossed, that is one of their responsibilities in that relationship as well. Your time with the brokerage is entirely at will. Your license can be surrendered by either yourself or by the designated broker at any time, with or without cause. Um, when you surrender your license does become inactive and it's sent back to the state, is what they'll call it. They used to mail them back, and you'll see that referenced in here, but it doesn't really work like that anymore. Um, yeah, I mean, that's pretty much it on that one. So then they go into prohibited conduct and reasons for disciplinary action. So they cover things that are prohibited in this book. Hold on, let me get to the further back. So on page 274, 275, there are some long lists of unprofessional conduct, specific illegal acts that you're not allowed to engage in. Um, if you do not have this book and you want this information, on the back of the packet that I uploaded, I have all of my contact information. Send me an email, and I'm happy to send you a scan of this chapter. So then you have that. And I'll put my email in the chat too, just in case you had any issues accessing that packet or this information. So, with the unprofessional conduct and reasons you might be disciplined, I'm not going to go through all of these, but for the most part, if you're being deceptive, if you're intentionally not being honest, um, if you're engaging in moral turpitude, which encompasses that dishonesty, corruption, anything related to something that may or may not constitute a crime within the bounds of your license. If you're advertising deceptively, if you're working outside the scope of your license, that's one that I feel like I hear a little bit more about, because we do toe the line of practicing law. We are practicing law actually in a very limited capacity. Our forms are pre-generated and we're given the freedom to fill those in as we see fit, more or less. But when we step outside those bounds from a real estate agent into a lawyer, that's when you definitely get into trouble or overstep our bounds into the inspector realm or the lender realm. Basically, stay in your lane. If you are a managing broker and you're not overseeing the people that are below you, either on your team or part of your brokerage that you're overseeing, or if you allow or help somebody who is unlicensed or has an inactive license practice real estate. So even if you help somebody who's unlicensed, you could be disciplined for that. And then it goes on to illegal acts, including conversion, basically stealing earnest money and putting it into your own name, not disclosing relationships with vendors. So, appraisal relationships, lender relationships, any sort of like familial relationships. If you claim to be a part of the National Association of Realtors, but don't pay your dues, that could be considered an illegal act. Um, Failure to disclose your license status. So basically, being a secret agent, not being clear with people that you are a real estate agent when you're engaging in real estate conversations that may affect their properties. And then kickbacks, which I'm sure you've heard about. It's about on par with the non disclosure of relationships with your vendors. And then this is a lot in this chapter, you guys. Geez. And then within, or excuse me, not this chapter, but this topic on the list, um, they don't actually discuss the disciplinary actions in this portion. That is a separate topic. So we won't cover that here. They just wanted you to cover the reasons why you might be disciplined. So then it goes into compensation, probably one of the parts of this career that you're looking the most forward to. Maybe not the main one, but probably one of them. So when it comes to you getting paid, the biggest thing that you need to remember is that your commission checks may only come from your brokerage. If you accept a commission check or a fee or how whatever play on words that goes into that, if you accept money from a client or a vendor, anybody like that outside of your brokerage, that could be grounds for discipline. And that's a really big deal in real estate. Your brokerage does need to be in the loop on all of the money that you receive because the brokerage owns the listings. They need to have records of this stuff to comply with their own separate state laws that the office must abide by. um, I'm just making sure I don't miss any of this. Yeah, I mean, that's pretty much it. That's all you really need to know on that. And then the handling of monies and trust accounts. So with trust accounts, we're talking about earnest money and how that is handled. So you hear a lot about how to handle earnest money. We could probably spend an hour just diving deep on earnest money. Um, with that, when you in the transaction, if you're representing the seller, chances are good you're not going to have a lot to do with the earnest money other than ensuring that it's made it to where it's supposed to be within this specific time frame. If you represent the buyer, it's a little bit of a different game because you are responsible for your buyer participating and meeting deadlines within the transaction. So it sometimes happens that an earnest money check or a trust account check is given to you to deliver to the escrow company, to deliver to the brokerage, if that is whatever the contract states as the entity receiving the check. So having a clear paper trail of where that money has been and each time it changes hands is essential. So documentation of that, um, of those trust accounts. Also, when that money is deposited, that it is being deposited separately from any brokerage funds or escrow funds that are not earnest money. So if the earnest money check is written for $10,000 or less, every escrow company and some brokerages have a pooled account, and all of the earnest monies for all of the transactions they're working on go into the same account. And if that, excuse me, that money can only be used for earnest money. You can't deposit the I don't know, the fees that they've earned for their services. They can't pay their electricity out of there. Like that is only earnest money. So no commingling of funds with other funds within that entity or with your own funds. Um, if the check that is received is 10,001 cent or more, you're required to give your client the option to either deposit that money into a pool account or open a separate account that is interest bearing for the duration of the transaction. the amount of interest that you're going to accrue on $10,000 is not going to be very much. I mean, even if they put $50,000 in there, it's only going to be sitting there for 30 to 45 days. But if it goes into that separate account, the person who wrote the check is entitled to the interest that is earned on that money during that time. Again, it's not very much, but if that's what they want, that's what they want. For the pooled account, if that is an interest bearing account, that money is paid out to the state treasurer. And then that money is split between the Washington Housing Fund and then the Washington Education Fund. I don't know if they'll ask you that, but that's what happens with any interest earned on earnest money in Washington State. So if you're representing the buyer and you deposit the earnest money check with your brokerage, let's say that the check is $10,000 and your commission is $15,000. Instead of the escrow company requesting those funds be sent to them so that they could turn around and send $15,000 back after you sent 10, it doesn't make sense. So the brokerage is able to move money from that trust account to their account to pay a commission if it was just going to be a silly back and forth like that. Does that make sense? Yeah? Okay. So that's really the only way. So they could take that $10,000 out of that account. The escrow company would send five more, and then the brokerage would cut you a check for the 15,000 instead of requesting it all. And then the other thing for you to know about this specific topic here is that if a firm is or a brokerage is bought out by another brokerage, then you all of the money that is held in the trust accounts would just transfer to the new brokerage, and there would just need to be a letter from the designated broker allowing that transfer. Oh my goodness, guys. All right. How are we doing? Is this helpful at all? I feel so off my game, guys. I was driving home today and the traffic was miserable. Totally slowed me down. And then it took me way longer to get out of the office than I expected because I like to do these from home since it's, you know, when it's 5 o'clock, I'm home, I'm done. I don't have to drive home.
I had
Shay?
a question.
Yeah.
You just said that about payment. I was writing stuff down and I missed that about the brokerage paying
Mm,
the 15,000.
yeah.
I thought only the brokerage out of the expense account could pay the commission. But if it is in the pooled, it could pay the licensee, the broker, a portion of that, and then the rest could come out of the general fund.
So yeah, so for example, if you represented a buyer and they gave you a $10,000 check, you took it back to your brokerage and they deposited it in their trust account.
Uh-huh.
And then 3 weeks later, it's time to close. So that money, that $10,000 needs to go back to the escrow company so they can apply that as a credit to the buyer.
Mm-hmm.
And then after it closes, the escrow company sends $15,000 back to the brokerage for
Correct.
your commission.
Uh-huh.
Instead of the back and forth, the escrow company will tell the brokerage to take the money from the trust account to
Okay.
move it to their general expense account, and then they'll only send 5 grand over.
Okay, so it is the direction from the escrow company. It's not something that
Yes,
the brokerage would, or the designated broker even would make that decision. It's something that the middleman does. Okay, that
pretty
makes
much. Yep, they'll give instructions on how they're moving forward, and it will include that.
okay. Thank you for the clarification.
Of course, of course. Um, we have a couple minutes left. I didn't get through all of that. I'm so sorry, you guys. Um, I do have, if you're not part of it, in our Facebook group, I have recorded I have recorded past sessions and then I post them in that group. You can search within the group, and if you look for recording and then comma and then state, it'll pull up any recordings I've done in the past about the state material. Um, I've been doing this for 2 years and nothing has changed in 2 years in this information. I've only been recording since like the middle of last year because we didn't do this on Zoom before. It was all in person. So the recordings aren't very old, but there are some there where I definitely have dove into the clock hours and what's expected for the different types of licenses. Um, and like I said, I do have a scan of this chapter of the Rockwell book, so I can share that with you too if you don't have this book.
The Facebook account? I'm sorry, I'm loud.
Yeah, I'll put the link in the chat
Perfect.
because I always kind of, I don't know why I created it, and half the time I can't remember what the URL is. All right, do you guys have any questions? Anything I can help with?
Well, we're going over state because my signal is bad because I've lost power. Well, now I got power back. It was all state today, right? Other than going over
Yeah.
the test. Okay.
Yep,
will-
yeah. I did record it. I'll post it tomorrow in the Facebook group, and I did just put that link in the chat. If you're not part of the group, feel free to join. I do post the schedule of upcoming sessions, and I'm doing something new this year. Usually I've been doing one session per week, but I instead am doing 3 sessions a month, and one of those sessions is a Saturday for 2 hours. So I figured we'd try that because sometimes there's way more information that I can cram in there. So that first one will be next Saturday at 10 a.m. So I'm going to give that a shot, see how it goes, see if you guys find that of value. So we'll see. There's a question in the chat. Eleanor asked, can you talk briefly about initial and adjusted basis and the purpose of these in terms of taxes if you have time? Yes, somebody asked about this last week, and there was somebody else on the call who, if he doesn't work in finance now, he did in the past because he knew his stuff and helped me understanding that. Let me get over to that. So if you aren't to this information yet, don't sweat it. Okay. So when income, well, hold on. Yes. Give me 1 second just to look at this for a minute. Sorry. Okay. So when you sell a property, you pay taxes just like anything else we do. You pay taxes on it. So when you purchase a property, whether it's an investment or a personal property, there is going to be usually a loss or a gain when you sell that home. You're either going to make money or lose money. If you own a home right now in the Seattle area, you are making money and you're making a lot of it off of your house. So when you go to sell that property, um, you can use that. If it's a loss, you can use it as a tax write-off. If it's a gain, you are taxed on that gain. So the tax basis, that is the amount of money that you have into the property. Or like the original cost to obtain that property. So with that initial basis, just to cover that, yeah, includes the purchase price of the home and includes the closing costs for that home. So like basically the total that you paid at closing, not just the purchase price and not just what you've paid on your mortgage so far to date. Okay, So that is the initial basis, the amount of money that you have into the property at closing, or the cost of the property at closing. The adjusted basis reflects any capital expenditures and any allowable depreciation deductions. So the capital expenditures, those are costs for improvements. So maybe you um, put in solid surface countertops. Maybe it was like Formica before, or you add a room onto the house. You do something that is going to improve the property financially. Painting the house, um, buying new furniture, or things like that, those aren't really going to add value. They may add appeal, but they don't add monetary value. So you are able to increase or decrease your initial basis to reflect money that you poured into the home to improve it. Um, and you can use that for your income tax benefit. So we're not talking about property taxes, we're talking about income taxes and how property ownership affects those taxes. Um, Things such as maintenance expenses. So like air filters, or, getting somebody out to clean the gutters, those are just costs of doing business with home ownership. And then depreciation. So if there's any loss in the value of the property, or, I mean, really that's it. If, I don't know, maybe the area is depreciated, or I don't know, this happened a fair amount like in 2008 when we had an economic recession, property values dropped. It's just not a realization of our market now. But I feel like I really, really rambled on that. But in really brief summary, initial basis is where you initially started when you closed on the home, what you paid for it, the actual cost of buying the home. And then the adjusted basis is when you add capital expenditures, meaning any investments in the property that will improve the property value, or depreciation, meaning loss in value on the property, can increase or decrease your initial basis and the amount that you are taxed on. Does that make sense, Eleanor? Hi.
Oh, yes, sorry. Yeah.
Okay.
That makes
Awesome.
sense.
Perfect.
Thanks. Mhm.
Okay. All right. Well, does anybody else have any questions? I know we went over a little bit, but we kind of, had a slow start, so no biggie.
What time will the video be uploaded?
When I find a minute,
No
it'll
problem. Take your time.
definitely be tomorrow. When I upload it, I can tag you.
Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. Anybody else have any questions?
I do.
Okay, yeah.
So, the prep on Wednesday or next Saturday, is
Yeah.
it basically the same thing that you went through, or is it more in depth of each section?
So I try to keep these fluid. I don't like to do the exact same thing every time because I want these to be of value to you guys repeatedly. So it depends on who's on. If I have a bunch of new people that don't have any of that initial information we went over, I'll do it again. But if most of the people on the call have been here before, I'll just dive into topics and skip it and then cover it at the end. So then you can hop off early if you don't want to hear it again. So I know that's not super helpful in terms of like if you want to hop on late or early or anything like that. But
Well, it is. It is helpful because I'm not at home right now on the 23rd. I should be more prepared because my test is the 28th. But I was thinking because I just canceled it and I'm like, I wonder if I should join or not, because I'm ultra paranoid about the test, even though I've done all my hours, I've been practicing. But now that I canceled, I'm like, maybe I should reschedule just to be sure.
So the gauge of if you're ready to test or not is how well you're doing on your practice tests. If
Okay.
you're taking those and you're consistently getting in the high 80s or
Okay.
better, you're ready.
Okay.
Now, you know if you're getting them right because of memorization or if you're getting them right because of understanding. So be
Right.
aware of that.
Yeah.
And then if you're doing great, then you're ready. Like I said, 85 and higher, you're good to go.
Okay. Okay, so
Then
then I'm good because I've been getting high scores, and part of it's memorizing it, but part of it that I learned today is understanding it. So I'm gonna divert my schedule a little, or yeah, my learning a little bit to understand it. So I will gauge it next week. Perfect.
something that I did to Joseph that was on here for a second, then hopped off. That's about what
Uh-huh.
time I was going to post tomorrow. He and I, we were talking once about, I don't remember what it was, but I Googled it because I wanted to see if there were any images. And sometimes that is so helpful. Like, oh, we were talking about different types of easements, the subservient and all of that kind of stuff.
Yep.
And pulled up a picture and he was like, oh, okay. Sometimes
Right.
just having that visual
Right.
is super helpful. And then on the back of that packet that I uploaded, there are some other suggested resources that are out there.
Uh-huh.
There are prep agent videos on YouTube that are free to watch.
Okay.
So prep agent only focuses on the national portion.
Okay.
And it's just a guy. I don't know where he's at, but he's talking about this stuff better than I do. And he just
Well,
walks
I think what
through.
I really want, because those visuals are really good and they are good in
Yeah.
the Rockwell online training.
Mhm.
My, what I got, and maybe you have this, is, truth in lending, and then just like a little bit more about it so I can attach that to which section of real estate to learn it in. Same with Washington laws or statutes, so I can have that. That was really good in the Rockwell training. However,
Mhm.
I'd like to find out something like that so I can say, okay, Washington statute is this. And so I can learn that. And like truth in lending and of credit, obviously. I mean, I've been working in that world for a while, but it would just be nice for flashcards, I guess, or a study tool for
So,
me.
yeah. So actually, in the Facebook group, there is a section of that says files, and there are flashcards uploaded there that you can print off and cut out. You don't have to put them
Perfect.
together. Yeah. And
Okay.
then Rockwell does sell flashcards. I think they're like $10 maybe. So they sell some, and then there is an app called Quizlet. It's an app
Oh,
and
yes.
it's a website. Yep,
Yeah.
digital flashcards. And then in that file section in the Facebook group, I have some additional practice questions uploaded there.
Perfect.
Any resources I've found, any study helps. There's a ton of practice questions uploaded there from a few different resources.
Okay.
Some a little out of left field, that aren't very common schools, like that people don't really go to very much. But I think that that's helpful just to see the
Okay.
information in different formats. So
Perfect.
check that out too.
Okay. Well, if I have any more questions, Robin, I've got your email as well, but
Perfect.
I'm just a little over, I go over the top when I'm studying. And so I just want to make sure I want to do the best. I know you only need 70, but I want to get it the first time and
Sure.
carry on.
Well, if this helps, when you pass, they do not tell you your score.
I know.
Yeah. So even if you got 100 or 71, it's the exact same result either way. All
Well,
you need is 70.
perfect. Well, thank you so much. This was
Of
great.
course. Of course. All right, you guys have a great night.
Thank you.
Yeah. All right. Bye.
Bye.